Good evening, everyone. This is the June 29th, 2020 meeting of the Hillsborough Township Board of Education. Whereas the Open Public Meetings Act, Chapter 231 of the laws of 1975 provides that a public body may exclude the public from that portion of a meeting of which the public body discusses certain matters for which confidentiality is required as permitted in Section 7B of the Act. Resolved by the Board of Education of the Township of Hillsborough and the County of Somerset and the State of New Jersey as follows. Oh, I'm sorry. I'm moving us into public session when I should have opened the meeting. In accordance with the State Sunshine Law of New Jersey, adequate notice of this meeting of the Hillsborough Township Board of Education was provided on June 25th to the Hillsborough Beacon and the Courier News, and we will be moving immediately into executive session, but I'll have a roll call, please. First, Mr. Mahmood.
Surely. Mr. Gillette? Mrs. Haas?
Here.
Dr. Harris?
Here.
Mrs. Maroon? Mr. Oliver?
Here.
Mr. Pulsifer?
Here.
Mrs. Stats?
Here.
Ms. Trujillo?
Here.
And Dr. Sasson?
Here.
We have a quorum.
Great, thank you. So now I'll take a motion to move into executive session, but I'll read the info first. Whereas the Open Public Meetings Act, Chapter 231 of the laws of 1975 provides that a public body may exclude the public from that portion of a meeting of which the public body discusses certain matters for which confidentiality is required as permitted in Section B of the Act. Resolved by the Board of Education of the Township of Hillsborough and the County of Somerset and the State of New Jersey as follows. The matters to be discussed are negotiations with the Hillsborough Principals and Supervisors Association and a personnel matter and the Superintendent Goals. The matters discussed in executive session shall be disclosed to the public when the need for confidentiality no longer exists. Do I have a motion to move into executive session?
So moved.
Thank you, Judy.
Second.
Thank you, Dr. Harris. Okay, so we are now in executive session. We will sign off of this and be back at 7:30 p.m. Thank you. Hello, everyone. We are back from executive session. May I have a roll call, please, Mr. Mahmood?
Surely. Mr. Gillette?
Here.
Mrs. Haas?
Here.
Dr. Harris?
Here.
Motion made.
Here.
Thank you. Mrs. Maroon?
Here.
Mr. Oliver?
Here.
Mr. Pulsifer?
Here.
Mrs. Stats?
Here.
Ms. Trujillo?
Here.
And Dr. Sasson?
Here.
We have a quorum.
Thank you, Mr. Mahmood. We will now say the Pledge of Allegiance. Please rise. I pledge allegiance
to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Well, I'm so much more appreciative of the band and the choir's performance of the virtual graduation after hearing that. We have correspondences listed. We have the minutes from the regular public meeting of June 8th. Do I have a motion to approve those?
So moved.
Thank you. Do I have a second?
Second.
Thank you, Anne and Jane. I don't know. I think Anne came in first there. Any comments or corrections on the minutes that were already obtained? Okay. All those in favor?
Aye.
Anybody opposed or abstaining? Seeing none?
Motion passes.
Thank you. And we have the superintendent's report. Dr. Antunes?
Thank you, Dr. Sasson. Did you want to add a little comment first?
Oh, do I need to say that now?
Sure.
Yeah, so I just want to thank, I want to recognize again that we had our virtual graduation video premiere a week ago today. And I thought it was very well done. There were a few glitches, but those will be corrected and sent out in an HD version for the students to enjoy for for many years to remember these incredible times. I want to specifically thank again the high school administration for all the work and our videographer. But I also want to thank the community and the police and the firemen for the sirens. I went outside at 8:20 and I was beeping my horn, and I had a little siren going on a loudspeaker. And when I stopped beeping, they still continued for such a long time, and it was so great. Some of my neighbors came out to thank some pots and pans too, so that was really wonderful. So I'm really happy for the seniors that they hopefully got to experience that. I heard some of them came to the high school to see the police and fire in person as well, in their cars, so that it was all safe. But I'm appreciative of everything that the community did to help make this a special night for the kids. And we're hopeful that they will have an opportunity to get together again before they all depart into their next stages in their life's journeys. So with that, I will turn it back over to you, Dr. Antunes.
Thank you. I'm happy and excited to announce, I know many of you have not know that our Assistant Business Administrator, Ashley Sangiuliano, is out on maternity leave, and I'm happy and excited to announce the birth of her daughter, Brooke Avery Sangiuliano. Ashley is, as I said, our Assistant Business Administrator, gave birth to Brooke on June 20th at 12:16 a.m. Brooke is 19 inches long, 7 pounds and 1 ounce, and all are doing well. Baby mom and dad are doing well, and I know that the board and many people in the public and the staff join me in congratulating Ashley and Steve and welcoming Brooke to the world. Congratulations to Mrs. Kelly Owens, our ASI teacher at Auten Road Intermediate, who recently published an article titled "Kids Learn More When We Invite Them In" on Middleweb, a website focusing on teaching and learning in grades 4 through 8 that provides resources for teachers, school leaders, parents, and others interested in the success of young adolescents. Terrific job, Mrs. Owens. Mrs. Candy Myers, a science teacher at our high school, recently shared that many of our students participated in both the Mid-Atlantic Regional Comagination and Local Comagination competitions. At the Local Comagination competition, we took 3 first-place awards and 1 second-place award. For the Mid-Atlantic Regional Comagination competition, we had 2 teams that were invited to compete. Both of those teams earned recognition. Emily Pan and teammate Grace Zhang tied for second place in the medicine health category, and Michael Chen and Aravind Krishnan and Yash Parikh won honorable mention in the new material category. Congratulations to all of our students who participated. And finally, I'd like to take a moment to recognize the effort of some of our HSAs and staff who supported the students and community during our school closures. The HES HSA donated $1,725 worth of ShopRite gift cards in increments of $25 to be distributed to families in need with the help of our executive chef, Kathy Major DiGirolamo, our food services manager, who was able to coordinate the distribution while families picked up their meals at the high school. Our Auten Road HSA coordinated a Moving Up booklet that compiled positive and encouraging words for our 6th grade students who will be moving to the middle school next year. Also, thank you to Mrs. Budiff, Ms. Lyons, and Ms. Newton for coordinating an initiative to replenish items in the Hillsborough food pantry. Each team was assigned a specific item to donate. The Triangle Elementary School's HSA donated $240 to the Hillsborough Food Pantry with leftover class party money in the name of Triangle School and its staff. And the Sunnymead HSA gifted all 4th graders with their yearbooks. So it's wonderful when people share these things with us, because then we can share them with the community. So thank you for doing that. We have 2 other presentations. One I will do next, which is a very exciting one to do, is honoring our retirees. And while we're doing it a little bit differently this year because we're not in person, and we can't be there to celebrate with them in person, we put this together. And I really need to thank my secretary, Kate Shaughnessy, who really got all of the information from the building administrators and district administrators and put this together for us. So this is our little thank you to them. So again, despite not being able to celebrate our retirees in person, we do want to take a few minutes to recognize our staff who are moving on to their new retirement journey. We have 36 retirees, which come out to over 790 years of service to Hillsborough students, and over 18 of them have dedicated more than 20 years to our community. So on behalf of the Board of Education, we thank you for your wisdom, kindness, and dedication. You've made a difference in so many lives, and we wish you nothing but good health and happiness in retirement. These are in alphabetical order. So we have Dr. Ack Mitchell, who began her career in 2004, and she shared time between Amsterdam and Woods Road. And she was a great advocate for children, a great resource for families, and we will miss her sense of humor and compassion and wish her well in her new chapter. Mrs. Accuracy worked all of her 25 years in special education in Hillsborough at Triangle and HES before moving on to Auten Road. And since retiring, she's done some traveling and was recently appointed to the Hillsborough Preservation Commission. She looks at her time teaching with great appreciation, having had an opportunity to make a real impact on the lives of our students. Mr. Bostwick taught in Hillsborough for 20 years as a science teacher, and he's remembered as a dedicated teacher who extended his knowledge of science in creative and intriguing ways, and his strength is his commitment to his students and the rapport he built with his classes that motivated and inspired all of his students. Mrs. Brennan joined the district in 2006 as a second career as an accountant. And it was shared that before becoming a full-time instructional assistant, she was a substitute teacher for us. And she shared that watching her students master new skills and subjects was the most satisfying part of her job. And once she's able to, she and her husband look forward to traveling domestically and internationally. Mrs. Burns spent 33 of her 40 years in education in Hillsborough. And she taught at Sunnymead and Auten Road before moving on to Woodfern to teach kindergarten, second and third grades, and ASI. And she and her sister are actually starting a candle business, and she's going to start a special ministry at her church and find ways to volunteer to stay connected with others. Mrs. Calomaneri started her career in 1999 and then returned to us to finish her career after taking a little bit of time off. And she, in her hands, in her capable and loving hands, our French program thrived, and our students became devoted to the French language and culture. She's been a wonderful and respected member of the staff, and we're so glad that she returned to the high school to finish her career with us. Mrs. Cheney became vice principal at Hillsborough High School in 2006 after starting her career, not in Hillsborough, but she was a Spanish teacher, world language teacher. It was shared that she is passionate about strong pedagogy, and one of her favorite things to do is observe teachers and provide thoughtful feedback about good teaching. She's been a resource for students over the years and has always led with her heart and belief that all children can learn in general and can certainly learn from their mistakes. Mrs. Corbett joined the district in 1994 as the personnel secretary and then moved to the business office in 99. And it was shared that she was a friend to everyone in the office and an outstanding employee. Her work was impeccable. She's currently enjoying retirement poolside with her husband and dogs, and she looks forward to spending time with her granddaughter in Martha's Vineyard as soon as she can. So we thank Sue, and we hope she enjoys her retirement. Dr. Colantino came to Hillsborough in 2001, and she started her career as a school psychologist on the child study team. And then she became a crisis psychologist and served as the school's anti-bullying specialist. She continually provided safe spaces, open heart and mind and frankness that helped students become their best selves and made a difference in many lives in Hillsborough. Mrs. Cornell served the district for 34 years as a speech and language teacher at Triangle.
She has left a lasting impact on the students she has taught over her remarkable career in education, and her positive contributions to Triangle School and District promoted the success of all of her learners in a caring and meaningful manner. We certainly wish her the very best in her retirement. Mrs. Donofsky taught for 33 years in Hillsborough. Her first year was the first year HES opened as an elementary school. It was shared that Mrs. Donofsky invites curiosity, inquiry, and extension into her classroom and is dedicated to the enrichment of all students. She's proud to have co-facilitated many programs at HES, including the first elementary student council, and she looks forward to traveling with her family, volunteering and puttering in her garden, and working on her golf game. None of these people really look old enough to retire. I just had to say that. None of them. Just saying. Mrs. Drill has been teaching for 35 years, and she started her career at Sunnymead, but also taught at Amsterdam, Triangle, and Woodfern before spending most of her career at HES. It was shared that she is a Wilson reading teacher who helped all students master phonics and become secure readers. She views her colleagues as lifelong friends, and her plans for retirement include organizing, spending time with family, and traveling. We will miss Karen and her tireless dedication to our students. Mrs. Furtis joined the Hillsborough Township Public Schools in 2001, and it was shared that she was known for her caring nature and her ability to connect with the students with whom she worked. Due to this special talent, Mrs. Furtis was often assigned as a one-to-one personal aide to some of our most fragile special ed students. Thank you for your love and dedication to our students. We wish you health and happiness in retirement, Barbara. Ginny Gallagher. Her time in Hillsborough, while in Hillsborough, she taught grades 5 and 6 at Auten Road and also taught at Woods Road. Since retirement, Mrs. Gallagher stays busy with her involvement in reflexology work with children with special needs, women recovering from breast cancer, and veterans of the armed forces. She's grateful for having had the opportunity to serve and care for children in Hillsborough, and she greatly misses her colleagues and students. Mrs. Imparato started her 36-year career in Hillsborough in 1993. It was shared that her first position was in the readiness program at Triangle Elementary School, followed by 4 years as a personal aide. She then transferred to HES, where she spent many years in the LDM, which is a Learning Disabled Moderate 1-2 grade program, and her last 8 years were at Woodfern, also in that same program. We thank her for her love and dedication to our students and wish her health and happiness in her retirement. Susan Jefferson joined the district in 1994 and completed 25 years of teaching in Hillsborough as a special ed teacher at Auten Road in Woodfern. It was shared that although she retired in October 2019, she says she thinks of everyone often, especially during this pandemic, and we are all heroes in her book. She now spends much of her time visiting her son, daughter, and brother, and is preparing to be a grandmother this October. Congratulations. Mary Jett has been an educator for 40 years and was one of the first faculty members at HES. It was shared that she's creative and made every lesson come alive. She embeds the importance of strong character in each lesson and connects her third graders as peer role models for the younger classes. She enjoys seeing the students' excited faces every September, the camaraderie shared at HES, and collaborating on school functions. We wish her a wonderful retirement. Sherry Kay retired after a career in Hillsborough, starting in central office in 2001 before moving over to the high school where she supported the vice principals. It was shared that from coordinating work orders to organizing keys to scheduling building utilization, she'd do anything and everything she could to help in any situation. And in so doing, she developed a strong rapport with the students who filed through to see their vice principals. Mrs. Kay had a great sense of humor and an uncommon work ethic, leaving no doubt that any challenge would be handled superbly. Mrs. LaCourte taught in Hillsborough for 17 years as a science teacher, and it was shared that her greatest strength as a teacher was her ability to create meaningful, intriguing lessons that have real-world application. She is a critical anchor in setting high standards for the Hillsborough Science Department, and it was shared that Mrs. LaCourte is a true learning partner who seeks every opportunity to find ways to help students connect to their learning and to each other. Mrs. Ling started her 31-year teaching career as an instructional assistant in the preschool disabled program at the Bloomingdale School. Over the next several years, Mrs. Ling worked at Woods Road, HES, and Sunnymead as a special ed teacher. It was shared that she will cherish her relationships with colleagues and staff and is grateful for the opportunity to serve our students. In retirement, she's going to learn how to play golf, travel, and spend more time with her grandchildren. Mrs. Lyon came to Hillsborough in 1995 and taught kindergarten, TP, and first grade during her tenure with us. It was shared that she's a nurturer by nature, calm and patient, and children just flourished under her care. Mrs. Lyon left a lasting impact on the many young minds she helped teach through the years, and we're so grateful to have had her as part of our Sunnymead family. She will be greatly missed. Mrs. Magaziner joined the district in 2006. Most recently, she taught 6th grade literacy at Auten Road. It was shared that she's an avid Snoopy fan and would sprinkle her room environment and educational presentations with the sage advice of the Peanuts. She embraced the teaching of writing and knows the power and magic of the written word. She has wished the best in her retirement. Mrs. Maglia has been a member of the Woodfern family since 1995, serving as secretary to the principal. It was shared that she's been a staff member for over 40 years and that both of her daughters were part of the Roadrunner family. She'll be greatly missed as a coworker and as a friend to the entire Woodford staff, and she and her husband are moving to South Carolina to be closer to their 2 grandchildren. Just shy of 20 years with Hillsborough Middle School, Mrs. Muller is retiring from her role as main office secretary. It was shared that Teresa Muller has greeted tens of thousands of students, parents, and faculty with a warm smile, patient hand, and cheerful, "How may I help you?" Even under the most challenging situations, her disposition was always calm and gentle. With her calm and gentle disposition, she has been a ray of sunshine in the middle school office and will be deeply missed. Barbara Pearson has worked in the district for 16 years, and it was shared that students loved going to her class. She worked closely with her colleagues to ensure lessons were adjusted as needed and utilized strategies and resources to support student learning. Speech teachers are known for changing the world one word at a time, and Mrs. Pearson certainly accomplished that during her time at Woods Road. Mrs. Petroselli began her 21 career in Hillsborough at Sunnymead before joining the ARA staff when they opened their doors. It was shared that she's been integral in building the advanced orchestra, spearheading the creation of the District Orchestra Festival, and creating the cadet program with high school students. She looks forward to spending time with her grandchildren, learning to paint, and continuing to play the trombone. Mrs. Sharon Peach started at Hillsborough in 2001, and it was shared that through her expertise and dedication, she has helped countless students overcome hurdles in articulation and expression. She advocated for all students and considered the whole child when evaluating needs and strengths. She also provided insight and input to the INRS team and CST meetings, and we're very grateful for her service, and we wish her the best of everything in retirement. Mrs. Pozarek began her career in Hillsborough in 2008. She's been in the field of education for 42 years. It was shared that Mrs. Pozarek is a tireless advocate for children with developmental disabilities, and she has an exemplary ability to evaluate, diagnose, and develop effective programs for her students, creating an interdisciplinary approach with OT, PT, and special education teachers. Her work with students is magical. We wish her all the best in her retirement. Mrs. Rice joined Hillsborough in 2002, serving 18 years as a French teacher. It was shared that she was completely committed to the students of Hillsborough, and she taught her students to fall in love completely with this beautiful language of rich culture. Her students were lucky to have her, and we wish her health and happiness in her retirement. Mrs. Rice worked for 29 years as a member of the district's custodial staff in various locations, including central office, the middle school, Woods Road, where she became the head custodian. And it was shared that she quickly became a part of the Woods Road community where the word no was never part of her vocabulary. Borough pride best describes Mrs. Rice. We wish you and your husband, Raphael, a happy retirement. And Raphael is next, and we retiring at the same time with almost 30 years in the districts to the district's custodial staff. It was shared that from long hot days to bitter cold all night snows, he was always available and always here. He started his career at the high school and finished as the head custodian at Sunnymead. He was not only a big part of the Sunnymead community, but of the entire Hillsborough community, and we wish him congratulations on his retirement. Mrs. Salvatore is a dedicated teacher who's been teaching for 42 years, 38 of which were in Hillsborough. It was shared that Mrs. Salvatore has devoted most of her career to helping our youngest learners read and develop a strong foundation in literacy. One of her favorite quotes comes from Mother Teresa: "Peace begins with a smile." That quote is certainly our Marianne. Thank you for your kindness, dedication, and laughter. We wish her the best in retirement with beautiful sunny beach days. Mrs. Talbert joined the district in '97 and retired in last August after 22 years in teaching. It was shared that during her many years in Hillsborough, she worked closely with our special ed students, both in larger classrooms and in smaller instructional groups. She was an outstanding Wilson teacher who was always willing to share her expertise with other staff members. Thank you for your dedication to our students and staff. You are certainly missed. Mrs. Wisnowski has spent 23 years helping students reach their fullest potential. Reach because Mrs. Wisnowski is a Sunnymead and Woods Road Elementary Reach teacher. It was shared that she served as a resource and role model for her colleagues. She has approached her work with passion, purpose, and enthusiasm and was contagious to both her students and colleagues. She wasn't contagious. Her passion, purpose, and enthusiasm were contagious. We are grateful to have spent so many years with such a gifted and talented teacher. Kitty Ward. Mrs. Ward started her career in 2002 at Sunnymead and then taught at HES for 12 years before returning to Sunnymead, where she taught first grade in ASI. It was shared that Kitty's wittiness and analytical skills will always be remembered and are greatly missed since she began her retirement. We wish Kitty continued enjoyment as she enters into her second year of retirement. Laura Zeminski has been at Hillsborough High School since 1991, committing 29 years of her life to the children of Hillsborough Township. It was shared that Mrs. Zeminski has been a resource to virtually every CST member in the high school and many across the district. She is knowledgeable, articulate, capable of mediating, and a woman of her own convictions. Mrs. Zeminski has been the bedrock of the Hillsborough High School Child Study Team for nearly 3 decades, and she will be missed.
Oh no, I think she is frozen. Dr. Antunes?
Yes.
Okay,
Yes.
you were frozen there for a minute.
Oh, okay. Sorry. Did everybody hear me say congratulations and best of all to everybody, that they'll all
No.
certainly be missed?
Right now.
Right now we just heard you, but
Okay. Sorry about that. Sorry about that.
So I'm going to ask the board on the class. We are really sad that we can't all be together to celebrate our retirees and have the tradition of seeing you all in person and to have cake together one last time. But we really do want to say thank you for everything you did for our students and our district. Each of you played a significant role in making us a wonderful district and a wonderful community. And so we really do thank you. So I did get a couple of pieces of public comments during this time, specifically to the retirement of Mrs. Petroselli. One from Janet Eichfeld in Fox Lake, Illinois, just witnessing Mrs. Petroselli's retirement, and one from Sudetha Shyamalan, who says, Mrs. Petroselli has done so much for me, more than she probably knows or realizes. First as a teacher at Eris, and for the last few years as a mentor and friend. When I first joined the strings program at Eris, I started off on the viola, and after 1 week, it was clear that it was not for me. If it hadn't been Mrs. Petroselli working with me and helping me to switch to the cello, I probably wouldn't have gotten this far in the program and would have missed out on so many amazing opportunities. But most importantly, the opportunity to be your assistant director these last 2 years have helped me grow as an instrumentalist, a leader, and just as an individual. Thank you for everything you've done and you have taught and done for me and every student that has walked through your doors. Your impact on the Hillsborough Strings program and my life will never be forgotten. And I wish you all the best in retirement. And I'm sure so many people could say something like that about so many of our retirees, over 750 years in our district total, really is amazing. So with that, I want to say thank you again. Go ahead, Dr. Antunes.
No, that's exactly. Thank you again. I mean, it's amazing. And it also goes to show that when people join Hillsborough, typically we're lucky enough that we retain them, whether they want to stay because of their commitment to our students or the community, whatever it is. It sends a huge message. So it's positive.
Yeah.
We now have Dr. Sasan, which we're mandated to do the 2018-19 school self-assessment for determining grades under the Anti-Bullying Bill of Rights, and Miss Smedley is here to make this brief presentation to the community. So, Miss Smedley, if you're ready, you can begin.
Okay, great. Thank you. So this is for the 2018-19 school year, as Dr. Antunes just mentioned. Just wanted to focus your attention on that. So we are able to give ourselves scores based on these different categories, or what the state calls these core elements. And you'll notice, and we don't have the prior year or 2 years prior for comparison, but our scores have stayed relatively stable, going up a little bit in the HIB personnel and core element number 5. So we've gotten to the point where we have almost perfect scores in that area, and that is because of an increase in training for our volunteers, our parent organizations, offering them the opportunity to learn about our HIB policies in addition. So that is an increase over prior years. The slight differences that you notice in HIB programs are typically in our elementary schools are usually covered by assemblies, guest speakers, those kinds of things. So that number is high in the areas in those schools that had some more assemblies, and those are generously supported many times, especially at the earlier grades, by our HSA. So we thank you for the support of our programming there. They help out a lot. In the middle and high school, our municipal alliance in town offers funding for some of our prevention programs as well. So each of these scores comes from the HIB specialist, which in most cases is a school counselor or student assistance counselor at each school, working with the principal to score these different areas. And then we get a total district grade of 72 out of 78, which you see down at the bottom. I think that's probably about it, unless there's any questions or anything else that you wanted me to review.
I don't know if go ahead, Lorraine.
Ms. Smedley, when we reviewed this in the education committee prior to your presentation, and I had a couple of questions that I don't know if you'll be able to answer, but I thought I would ask. The first is how does a 72 out of 78 compare to state expectations or to other districts in the state? And the second is, why are there maximum numbers of things and not minimum numbers of each of these things? Because I would think this is a very important piece of what we do, character education and anti-bullying. So do you have the answers to either of those questions? Sorry to put you on the spot. I should have actually sent these to you so you could be prepared. But
that's okay. So I don't know any state averages, and I haven't seen the comparisons. These are things that are typically also on the New Jersey performance reports, and although I've looked at ours, I have not really studied them against anybody locally or across the state. They are clearly subjective, though, because the state allows each school to do their own grading, and so each one of those points adds up, sort of subjectively of what you consider to be a training program, for example, what you consider to be quote unquote all staff. So that can get dicey when we have contracted service providers. So some schools may give themselves a 9 in that area because they say all is all. In most cases where we have an 8 in something like that, it's because we haven't guaranteed that all of our contracted service providers, like contracted bus drivers, are trained locally by us every year. So they don't feel comfortable certifying that all is the definition of all. So I think that it's difficult to do an apples to apples comparison. As far as having the minimum versus the total, I would imagine that's just the state and how they created the rubric. I'm not sure. I haven't been asked that question before, so I'm not sure why that's not minimum instead of maximum.
Okay, thank you very much. Does anybody else have any other questions for Ms. Smedley? Okay.
Thank you, Jess.
Okay, thanks.
That concludes the superintendent's report, Dr. Chassan.
Great, thank you. Okay, so then the next item on the agenda is, is committee reports. So can I ask Mrs. Haas to give the Education Committee report first?
If I could find my microphone, I will. Anyway, we had a very lengthy Education Committee meeting on June 9th. First item was the adoption of a math program for grades 6 through 8. It is the Big Ideas math program, and it is hoped that this will make curriculum delivery more cohesive between the Hillsborough Middle School and the Hillsborough High School. And also, we've noticed that math scores had dropped in 8th grade, and we're hoping that this will be helpful once again because it will jive better with the high school program that we have. We also approved a nonfiction book for AP English, and it's called The Power of Habit. And this is a book about how habits come to exist and how they can be changed. It has a bunch of anecdotes and, observations from the business world. And this was unanimously approved by the committee. We took a look at projected enrollment, and we understand that the administration is looking at this once or twice a week during the summertime to make sure that all of our, classes are of reasonable size. So that will continue. We talked about the possibility of future state aid reductions and consequences. We talked about superintendent goals for 2021. We talked about summer reads, and I'd like to apologize because our summer reads were delayed this year, in part because of the pandemic and the unavailability of some of the books that were being considered at the time. And we had additional discussion in relation to this after the Education Committee was over. And 3 books were chosen. They both die at the end by Adam Silvera. They Called Us Enemy by George Takei and Justin Eisinger, and Truly Devious, a Mystery by Maureen Johnson. So we have a sort of sci-fi book, we have a graphic nonfiction, and we have a murder mystery that hopefully will be of interest to all of our high school students over the summer. And we're going to further discuss the process for reviewing these books, maybe with an eye to getting the recommendations done earlier in the future. We also had a discussion about curricular exposure to diversity and racism issues. And we are putting together specific standards and content per subject and grade area where the district currently addresses these issues. And we had a side discussion about diversifying our teaching staff, which I saw that the HR committee also discussed. We discussed the HIB report, which everybody just saw. And that was it for the Education Committee. I would just like to mention that I also attended 2 outside meetings. One of them was an excellent class by the New Jersey School Boards Association on leadership shaping leadership, Legacy Shaping Leadership, which was given on June 16th. And I recommend to all board members, if you can possibly get that online, to take the time to watch it, because they had wonderful speakers. And several board members attended a meeting of the Labor Management Collaborative that we joined through Rutgers University. And that took place on June 25th. And it seems that a lot of the districts who participated in the Labor Management Collaborative had a lot of activities and programs related to the pandemic and reopening schools, working with through this management and labor collaborative, and also were able to obtain a lot of resources because of their membership in terms of Rutgers professional help and grant opportunities. So I just wanted to bring those two things back as well. That's it for me.
Thank you. Thank you, Judy. Can I have Mr. Pulsifer for the HR committee meeting? Mr. Pulsifer?
Sorry, I lost my control of my volume on my mic. So the HR committee met on June 11th. We also had a discussion about the superintendent goals for both 2019-2020 and 2020-2021. That's a mouthful. We had some personnel updates. Like the HR committee, we discussed projected enrollment. The HR committee always reviews this in terms of impact on staffing, in terms of classes that may, grade levels at individual schools that may cross the tipping points for our maximums for students in the classroom. So we reviewed that, and we're actually in pretty good shape. We discussed the substitute line items as part of the budget and how we are managing substitutes as we go forward. We did discuss, as the education committee did, also the potential for state aid cuts and what that might mean to us, specifically in the area of HR. We talked about the potential for looking into some wellness programs for the district. We also had a good, healthy discussion about diversity in our staff and in our student population, and discussing the current climate and how we can improve both the educational environment by reviewing and acting on the diversity with our staff, and hoping we can help with that kind of becoming much more of a parallel to the diversity of our community. And I think that's it. Yeah, that's all. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Pulsifer. Mr. Gillette, can I ask you to give operations, please?
Sure thing. Operations met on June 10th. We discussed briefly the superintendent goals. Also, we discussed, as you'll see on your agenda tonight, per federal and state regulation, we have to have a minimum price for our standard school lunch. And so we're below the minimum, so we'll need to raise our standard school lunch price to meet regulation. That's going to be a 25-cent increase recommended by Kathy Major. And we confirmed that. We recommend that also. Mr. Wozni, our architect of record, was in the meeting. He gave us an update on all the projects, and I'm not going to go through all of them, but you'll see it's in your minutes, and I believe we're going to have this, if not already, on the website, so that in some form, so that public can take a look. I'll just go over a couple of highlights. They're working on the high school auditorium, air conditioning, various roofing projects at many of the buildings. We talked about, I want to highlight the high school track and tennis court project, because in the minutes, you'll see there's a long discussion dutifully typed out by Mrs. Klein, I believe. But she could, I hope she has a lot of whiteout, because it's all outdated now. Mr. Mahmood can back me up on this, or give other insight into this if he wants. But we discussed the work that we were we desired to do some work in the beyond the end zones at the football field. Those are called the D zones. Originally we did not put that work in because we didn't think it would be within the budget that we set aside to do all this work, the track and tennis court. When we went back, we realized that it could be done in budget. So Mr. Mahmood surveyed after the meeting, a couple days after the meeting, you surveyed the operations committee members, and I believe we were all in agreement that we should pursue that additional work. So that kind of wraps up a huge page of my notes here in that sentence. Let's see. And then, let's see if there's any others. Oh, and also Mr. Wazzy talked about paving projects going on all around. We talked specifically about paving at Sunnymead, where the paving is going to be done in 2 portions. There'll be some done this summer and some done next year. But what will be done this summer will be very helpful for parents during pickup and drop off, reconfiguring where parents can drive in, drop off, and go. So that's good. What will be done next year is something specific for buses. So we took care of that. Let's see if there's anything else. I think that was about the highlights of it, except for, I don't know how to talk about this, the transportation invoice adjustments due to COVID-19. And I don't remember what we talked about that, but I had it in my notes. Let me see. Okay, so as you recall, even though we didn't do busing, the guidelines were that we had to pay the contracts. But that seemed a little unfair, so we received some new guidance, and we're going to get a savings of 10%. Is that correct, Mr. Mahmood? 10%. So they didn't drive anybody to school anywhere, but we're only going to have to pay 90% of nothing. So that's great. 90% of no work being done. So that's a real bargain. Thanks. All right, that's all I have. Thank you.
All right, thank you, Mr. Gillette. Before I give the governance committee meeting minutes, I want to open the floor for public comment since we're still using the Google form. So I'm just going to read this and then direct people to the Google form on the website. We very much welcome input from the public during virtual board meetings. There will be one time during board meetings that the public is invited to submit questions or comments. Members of the public may comment about any item that is listed on tonight's agenda before the board votes, or may choose to discuss any topic. Before you submit your question or comment, you will be asked to provide your name and address. Please understand that our virtual public forums are not structured as question and answer sessions, but rather are offered as opportunities to share your thoughts with the board. In instances where the board believes that there is a misunderstanding or inaccuracy, the board president or superintendent will address the comment. There may be times when a member of the public makes a comment or asks a question about personnel or hiring decisions. New Jersey statutes do not permit the board to discuss personnel issues in public session. So you can click on the link in the below the video that you're looking at on the website and insert your comment there, and I will read it until I close public comment. For now, I will return to the governance committee meeting minutes, and the governance committee met on June 17th. We discussed the superintendent goals. We also discussed board goals, and it's our current recommendation not to build any separate board goals into what our regular expectations are, which is that all board members attend meetings, both committee meetings and public and executive sessions, that we all respond to the superintendent evaluation and respond to the board evaluation as well, and that we complete all of our required trainings. We will also survey the board. Mr. Mahmood will survey the board after this meeting to determine comfort level with resuming in-person meetings, socially distanced at one of our buildings, and we'll determine, along with the governor's guidance, whether or not the public can participate. But if we get back to a point where we can at least have some people in a building, then we can have a call-in line that can be monitored by Mr. Handler during our meetings. But that does not mean that all board members need to be there in person for that to happen. We discussed contracts for unaffiliated staff. We also reviewed the bylaws, one of the bylaws 0155, and we recommended some changes so that it right-sized what that what the committee work is that actually is up to the practice of the board, what we actually cover in our committees and have covered since I've joined the board. So that bylaw has been changed and governance was added and things weren't really adjusted appropriately. So we're recommending those revisions for first reading tonight. We also reviewed policy 5460 on high school graduation and are recommending change to that as well, which is on our board agenda this evening as well. And that all came from the discussion at our last board meeting regarding the board's role in graduation preparations. As was pointed out, I think by Mr. Gillette, we are responsible for conferring degrees. We are not, however, responsible for setting up the graduation, but our recommendations in that policy make it so that the superintendent at the second meeting in January would have to report out to the board and the public about what those plans are with respect to date, time, location, et cetera, so that everybody is on the same page and the board and the public can comment at that time. And also requires that if any changes to that have to be made, that be brought back to the board for comment, not for our work in having or approving it. And then we also talked about potential state aid reductions. And I think that was it for governance. So I will open it up to questions from the board about the committee reports, and then we'll go to public comment. Mrs. Stats.
Thank you, Dr. Soisson. First of all, I would like to report on the Municipal Alliance. The main thing I want to mention is that members of the Municipal Alliance created a survival guide for the class of 2020, and it's an excellent source of resources for our graduates. Our schools have done a great job, I think, provided resources within their school environments, and we don't want to just leave them hanging dry. So this is an excellent list of resources covering so many different areas that we hope that they have been given, and we hope that they will be able to use it effectively. And also, I was wondering if is there? I thought I don't know if I saw it in the minutes or if you alluded to it, Dr. Soisson. If there are going to be regarding the reopening plan, are there going to be teams or groups of people that include a wide swath of people, from community members to teachers and students, et cetera?
I'll let Dr. Antunes answer that question.
I don't mean to put you on the spot, but where time is of the essence, so.
Absolutely, you're not putting us on the spot at all. Actually, the guidance was provided in the Friday afternoon, and this morning, Mr. Mahmood, Mr. Callahan, Dr. Feltry, and myself met, and we have set up meetings with different first district level administrators, and then with HPSA and HEA leadership, and then board members will be invited, and as will communities. So we've got the framework of a plan in place, which we suspect that after we have these minimum meetings, that we will all come together as a district restart committee, and then each school will have what's referred to in the road back plan, a pandemic response team. So literally it came out Friday late afternoon. Right. It was 104 pages. We all read it over the weekend. I carried it around several times. My kids were like, "You're reading it again, Mommy?" So every time I read it, I find something else, as do the others. So we are scouring it, and we are moving forward with that. So you didn't put us on the spot at all. It's exactly what we need to be doing.
Great. Okay. Thank you.
You're welcome.
Also, I do have another question. Again, I don't know if I don't know if I'm putting you on the spot, but just based on various communications, is there any plan at some point of having some kind of a, I don't know, task force or group or committee addressing the issue of racism? Again, that would include a wide swath of people from the community and the schools.
We're actually, again, you're not putting us on the spot because these conversations have been taking place for a while, so I appreciate that. That is actually, we're looking at that from a couple of different angles. As I said, this work has begun in the district and has been ongoing for quite a number of years, and we will continue that, and we're looking to expand that. I know Mrs. Haas talked a little bit about it in her education committee report, but this transcends all committees and really goes to more of a community function, which is absolutely within our plans to do.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Mr. Gillette.
Yes, thank you. I appreciate the governance committee taking a look at the items related to graduation, some of which I suggested. And I'm going to say something now. I don't expect it to get any traction because it did last time, but I just want to reiterate it again. This is a pre-K to 12 district, and unlike many of the other districts around this area, like a lot, but unlike others. I don't know that the graduation, and this is the same thing I said a couple months ago, I don't know that the graduation needs to be so high school centric. I would like to see participation by teachers or principals or whoever from the other levels, maybe one from each level. It really should be a celebration of we have kids that are in our district for 13, 14, even 15 years. So that was really part of my suggestion last time. I don't know where it's going to go, probably nowhere, but I just wanted to put it out there again. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Gillette. Mrs. Haas.
Microphone, yay. Okay, just in case there's anybody who didn't read the 104-page guidance that came out on Friday, I have to say that there were two things that really struck me funny. One of them was the recommendation that school districts should strive to share their scheduling plans with staff, families, and students at least 4 weeks before the start of school, which, given today's date and the very short time before July starts, gives us about a month to get this all done. And then there was another very interesting statement in terms of the use of reserve accounts, transfers, and cash flow, where it said, to the greatest extent possible, districts should consider making expenditures from various accounts or over budgeted lines, where to meet unanticipated costs and manage their cash flow. Over budgeted lines? Seriously? And then it says school districts should be able to use funds on deposit from reserve accounts to finance unanticipated expenses that arise as a result of COVID-19 pandemic. However, a school district would need the commissioner's approval to make the withdrawal, and the approval cannot be waived, and approval will not be automatic. So thank you very much, State of New Jersey, for all your help. Yeah, it was fun. I also had a chance, by the way, to look at the American Association of Pediatricians advisement on reopening the schools. And if you haven't seen that, I think it's pretty important. I think with all of the concerns about social distancing, masking, and everything else, the Pediatricians Association really puts a high store on getting kids back into school. They're weighing all of these issues against the social, emotional, and learning loss issues that I think we've experienced in only the 4 months that we were out this year. And I really think that should be taken into account. So be that all as it may, I hope we can get this done in the best way for the most people. That's it.
Thank you, Mrs. Haas.
One other minor thing. Our summer classes for advancement are going forward.
Yes.
And I didn't have that in my education report. That was an after report, but I'm glad to hear that those will be taking place as planned. So,
Okay, great, thank you. Mr. Gillette, did you have something else to add?
Yeah, I did, just real quick, since Judy mentioned the Friday night guideline dump, or whatever you want to call it. The thing that struck me about it was that districts are prohibited from just maintaining the virtual environment that they've had. They must open their buildings. That struck me as just, I don't know if it's funny or I didn't understand the purpose of it. The only purpose I could think of is that this way they'll never have to tell us when we can go back to normal, because now everyone will be open. If we were allowed to stay virtual, then they'd have to give us the guideline for when you can go back. That's troubling to me. Because my vote would have been to stay virtual and tell us, once the data tells me this, you can go back and you can put 50 kids on a bus or whatever. I hate to leave it open-ended like this, because this might be a tremendous financial burden. I would have rather save the busing costs and maybe spend the first quarter of the year virtual. At least have that option so we can discuss it. So I was troubled by that, and I don't understand the reasoning for it. I just have my fingers and my toes crossed that it all works out in the end. But that's all I had on that. Thank you.
Yeah. Mrs. Stats.
Yeah, I agree with Mr. Gillette. I understand a major concern is the social emotional concerns for our students. But we do have to, it's almost, I think some of it I thought was a little bit cavalier, how they address, make sure there's social distancing in the classrooms and on the buses, but there's no temperature or screening for children going onto the buses. And it's putting too much on our bus drivers as they're driving. Okay, I'm getting a bit too in the weeds, but I'm also concerned that while staff is mandated to wear masks, not the students, and it's usually when someone wears a mask, generally that helps the other people. So I'm concerned about the lack of concern for our staff and their health.
Yeah, unless they're wearing an N95 mask, in which case they are protected and not just protecting other people. But there wasn't particular guidance on what type of mask should be worn. I agree. There were some troubling things or things that I still have questions about. I agree with Mr. Gillette that it would be nice to continually get updates on what is permitted rather than, do your best to do all of these things and maybe protect, potentially not get anything further. But I think that I'm hopeful, or I have faith, I guess, that we will continue to get the right kind of data and to help us direct what should be happening. It is going to be a heavy lift to try to make things as normal as possible, especially going into October, November, when the flu starts coming too. So I think I'll be very interested to see how we try to implement in-person learning. And again, even if we go back 2 days a week with half the kids and 2 days a week with the other half the kids, and the fifth day everybody's home. Parents are going to still need to assist us in this process. So, we'll have to see where we finally end up. But it should be an interesting summer. I hope nobody had vacation plans in the administration. It'll probably be canceled anyway by now. But okay, any other questions on the committee reports before? Yes, Mrs. Leo and then Mr. Fox.
So I have a comment about in the governance committee where it was recommended that the board not pursue annual board goals this year. And when I had written to you privately, Lorraine, you'd said that we haven't had board goals since the time you've been on the board. I think the same has been true for when I was on the board for the last 3.5 years. But and I know we'll talk about the bylaw 155 later, so I won't go into detail with it. But in the bylaws, under governance committee, the governance committee is actually tasked with coordinating governance activities, including setting annual board goals. So I wanted to kind of point that out there, and I object to the governance committee saying that we should not do part of its, responsibilities. And I'll say more when we talk with the 155 later.
Sure. And as I said in my committee report, I think that the way that's written is not the tenor of what the committee was discussing, but that we have standard board goals, which the board has not met during my tenure on the board, to actually attend meetings, both committee meetings, public meetings, to do the superintendent evaluation and the board evaluation. And we would hope that those would still be would be board goals, but that was not written in the minutes. So I want to be sure that we're not forgetting any board goals. It's just making them really aspirational board goals is something that we discussed and did not think we wanted to pursue this year, given all of the stressors on not only the district but the board in trying to move things forward with getting back to in-person learning.
I understand that, but I wouldn't necessarily suggest today, but I would ask that at least at the next board meeting that we as an entire board could have that discussion so that we could put forth some suggestions for board goals, because otherwise I fear that it just keeps getting pushed down month after month, similar to other things we've talked about previous board meetings that just don't get addressed. So that's my biggest concern.
We had asked people to send in board goals and only, I think, got one or two, three responses. So I certainly invite people to send them in again, with the board goals that I had mentioned of board 100%, that our goal should be at 100% or as much as possible attendance at all meetings, committee meetings, public meetings, executive sessions, 100% response to the superintendent evaluation, 100% response to the board evaluation, and completion of all required trainings. So if anybody has anything above that, I know, Ms. Trujillo, you already did send something in beyond that, but I think the other ones that we got, I know the other ones that we got are already contained in that. So that's why I'm not naming board members who submitted those, but did you have something in addition to that, Mrs. Stats? I can't remember off the top of my head.
I think I did. I think about the possibility of reading a book. I think that was one of them.
Yeah, that's true.
I mean, nothing that major.
Right. Okay. Yes, go ahead, Mr. Trujillo.
Like, for example, like a crazy one would be like how the students have to read the whole school read. What if we as a board picked one of the books? I mean, I'm curious I have two children, so they will be entering 9th and 12th grade. So I will see some of those books, but I think, and I'm sure on education, you have read those books. So, but I think it might be kind of interesting if the students are having that discussion, why not the board?
Yeah, that's something to consider. I look forward to board members thinking about that and letting us know what they think. Any other? Yes, Mrs. Haas.
I just wanted to say one more comment in relation to the reopening plans. We received a letter from a member of the public that related her sister's experience in Virginia, where they are surveying all the members of the school district to find out what their needs are. And I was thinking very much about that, especially since I have relatives in Virginia who also sent me that. But I think it would be a very valuable thing to do. And because of the short time frame, it's something we would need to do practically immediately. Yes.
We are actually putting one together, Mrs. Haas, one for community and one for staff, actually. That's what we're considering doing, and we'll get that out sooner rather than later. But yes, we are considering doing that.
I would also like, for the community thing, I would like it to go into what people's needs are and their concerns and fears, because there's a lot of that out there in the community. But I would also like there to be an element for people to volunteer for what they can do to help. There was something in the state guidance about how people could waive their transportation. That would be very helpful if there are people who are driving their kids to school most of the time anyway, or kids who are walking to school. Even at the elementary level, if there are people who are crossing the street to Woods Road, if they would not be on the official pickup list for the transportation, there might be a point where we could actually condense routes without hurting people who otherwise would be needing bus rides. Things like that. If there are things that people could volunteer to do. I think we have a lot of members of our community who are looking and willing to help. And I think at a time like this, we should really look for all hands on deck. So just throwing it out there.
Thank you, Mrs. Sachs.
I'm glad you're having a survey that's being sent out to the community, especially the parents, because addressing childcare, especially if it's a hybrid solution, will be a nightmare. Do you anticipate, who else do you anticipate reaching out to in the community besides parents, Dr. Antunes?
So right now we're looking at parents but also staff members.
Okay.
Because many of our staff members may not have children, but they're community members. So we're looking to reach out to staff members and parents in the community at this point. And I suspect things will change from now, depending upon what the governor does. And we already know that he's pulling back a little bit on restaurants, indoor dining so I suspect that's, today or tomorrow or whenever we send that out, not today, but soon. And then I suspect that will change even within a couple weeks. That's why we want to sort of gauge where we are. We'll do that all along the way.
Well, I anticipate that the greater amount of time you're going to put into whatever plan it is, the more likely it'll be that plan won't be necessary.
Well, you know
That's a cynical me.
One of the things that we're doing, and it was also outlined in the road back, is that we're really trying to get all the stakeholders together. As I said, we're working with HPSA and HEA leadership to determine, essentially, they're asking us to build, as I think Mr. Gillette indicated, almost 3 hugely separate schedules, very different schedules. And so that's just it's hugely overwhelming for everyone. And so that's why we're breaking it down. And that's why it is absolutely imperative and essential that all hands are on deck and that we do have assistance and support from everybody, because this is unlike anything anybody has ever seen. And what works in Virginia and what works in New York and what works even in other school districts in New Jersey may or may not work for Hillsborough, but what works for us may not work for others. But that doesn't mean we want to throw the baby out with the bathwater. We want to look to see that the one that the board received today, there were some great FAQs in there. We started developing an FAQ for staff and for parents. So those things, we've got a list. We don't have answers to all the questions yet, but it's going to be an ongoing changing document, just like the guidance that we get is going to continue to be ongoing and changing. So those are our sort of our short-term goals.
Do you anticipate, I'm guessing you might have already done this, whether it's through a survey or just as consultation with township officials in the various capacities, or even, the leaders in places of worship? I'm just sort of spitballing.
Yeah,
here.
absolutely. Again, we're really going through the guidance, but yes, we're at the local Department of Health for sure. Our township, we're looking at certainly our Catholic Charities, because they run our before and after school programs. We're looking at, we really are looking at, that was part of the thing that Mr. Mahmood, Mr. Callahan, Dr. Feltry, and I did today, because as we read through that, we each came out with different things. And every time I reread it, I found more stuff. So I wrote that out, which is why, as we meet with with everybody before we get our full team together, that we're going to continue to gather and garner more information to hopefully have that full list. So yes, we are doing that as well.
Thanks again.
Thank you.
Okay. So seeing no more comment, I do have some comments from the public. Sharmitra Basu, what will be the status of substitute teachers in the township? From Ami Capizano, Two comments. Thank you to Mrs. Petroselli for inspiring Ria and getting her to love the string bass. And these are state recommendations, but as a district, Hillsborough needs to survey teachers, students of all ages, and families. We need to work together as a community. And then again from Sharmitha Basu, when do we get to know about school reopening? And again from Ami Capizano, let's consider crossing guards and crosswalks near the schools to ensure safety. I'm sure parents will drive children. In terms of reaching out to the community, has Hillsborough reached out to surrounding districts like South Brunswick, etc.? I think most of those answers were actually discussed during the board discussion just now. We hope to get more information out to the community as soon as we have the plan, but I guess we're supposed to strive for at least 4 weeks before school, but hopefully the surveys will come out in the next week or so. With regard to substitute teachers, I mean, if we're in person, we will still need substitute teachers. So if there are people looking to become substitutes, I'm sure we will accept their application. Okay. Then with that, I'll close public input on the action agenda, and we'll move to the to our business agenda. Dr. Antunes.
Thank you, Dr. Swasan. Okay, so we are going to move all the items as one agenda item. I know that Ms. Trujillo indicated she was going to separate out, and that's fine. We can do that. And I want to just note that there will be an addition to the HR agenda. It will be 11.16, which I will note when we go through it, and I will read that out loud. So here we go. The superintendent recommends that the Board of Education approve the education agenda as follows: 10.1 to 10.9. The HR agenda, 11.1 to 11.16, which I will read that last one, and the operations agenda, 12.1 to 12.11. Under education, we're approving professional travel related expenses, motion to approve curriculum writing, motion to approve staff for the summer credit advancement program, motion to approve books for the whole school read, motion to approve nonfiction books as listed, motion to approve the mathematics program, grades 6 through 8, motion to accept the FY 2021 IDEA grant, motion to accept the CARES Emergency Relief Grant, motion to approve revisions for policy for first reading for the high school graduation. In human resources, motion to approve the revised appointment of the acting assistant superintendent, motion to approve the resolution on to create the teacher special education positions for the 2020-2021 school year as per the attachment. Motion to approve retirements and resignations as listed. I'd like to point out that of the 4 people, Mrs. Yvette Cheney, Anna Cleeses, Nancy Petroselli, and Sharon Peach, we have over 68 years of experience retiring this evening. We've got the resignations as listed, the motion to approve the revised appointment as listed, and group changes for 2019-2020. Motion to approve extra coverage, and motion to approve contract changes as listed. Motion to approve a transfer change in assignment. Motion to approve a revised contract and to approve reappointments. Motion to approve leaves of absence as listed, and motion to affirm appointments. A motion to renew unaffiliated staff, and a motion to approve a virtual extended school year program. Motion to approve summer work hours, and a motion to approve a resolution to withhold the employment and adjustment increment of a staff member. I will read out that resolution now so that everybody's aware of that, and then I'll move on to the operations committee That resolution states, whereas the superintendent has made a recommendation to withhold the employment and adjustment increments of a staff member whose name is on file in the superintendent's office for the 2020 to 2021 school year based on failure to meet the professional standards expected of the employee. And whereas the board has considered the superintendent's recommendation and has determined that good cause exists for withholding the staff member's employment and adjustment increments, be it resolved that the Board of Education hereby authorizes withholding the employment and adjustment increments for the staff member for the 2020-2021 school year. Be it further resolved that the superintendent shall provide the staff member with notice of the Board of Education's decision, together with the reasons for the withholding of the increments within 10 days as required by law. The Operations Committee, motion to approve monthly bills, motion to approve the line item transfers as listed, motion to approve monthly financial statements, and the motion to renew Sodexo Food Services Management contract for the 2020-2021 school year, motion to approve the 2020-2021 cafeteria lunch prices, motion to approve the coordinated transportation agreement with ESC NJ for the 2021 school year, motion to approve the coordinated transportation agreement with the Somerset County ESC for the 2021 school year, motion to approve the 2021 transportation renewal contracts as outlined, motion to accept the donations as listed. Thank you very much to those who've donated. A motion to approve a settlement agreement as outlined, and a motion to approve revisions to bylaw for first reading. Thank you. Dr. Swasan, you're muted.
Yeah, I saw the red button come up. So before I take a motion to move the whole agenda. Is there anything that anybody would like to separate out? Mrs. Julia.
I'd like to separate out 12.11. That's the bylaws, 155.
Thank you. So we'll separate that. Anything else, Mrs. Stack?
I would like to separate out the added one, 11.16.
Okay, thank you. Okay, so can I have a motion to approve item 10.1 through 10.9, 11.1 through 11.15, and 12.1 through 12. 12.1 through 12.
10.
10, yes. Thank you.
You're welcome.
So moved.
Second.
Thank you, Mr. Gillette. May I have a roll call? Oh, any discussion on those before we vote? Seeing none, Mr. Mamoon, may I have a roll call, please?
Sure. Mr. Gillette?
Yes.
Mrs. Haas?
Yes.
Dr. Harris?
Yes.
Ms. Maroon?
Yes.
Mr. Oliver?
Yes.
Mr. Pulsifer?
Yes.
Mrs. Stats?
Yes.
Ms. Trujillo?
Yes.
And Dr. Sasson?
Yes,
Motion passes.
great. Then may I have a motion for 11.16?
So moved.
Thank you, Mr. Pulsifer. Can I have a second?
Second.
Thank you. Any discussion? No discussion. Okay, may I have a roll call, please, Mr. Mahmood?
Sure. Mr. Gillette?
Yes.
Mrs. Haas?
Yes.
Dr. Harris?
Yes.
Mrs. Maroon?
Yes.
Mr. Oliver?
Yes.
Thank you. Mr. Pulsifer?
Yes.
Mrs. Stats?
Abstain.
And Ms. Trujillo?
Yes.
And Dr. Sasson?
Yes,
Motion passes.
thank you. Can I have a motion to approve the revisions to the bylaws, item number 1211?
So moved.
Thank you, Mr. Pulsifer. Do I have a second? Thank you, Mrs. Maroon. Discussion? Mrs. Trujillo?
So I have a whole bunch of stuff to say about this, but I'll try and highlight the things that I that I think are most important. So I think this revision to the bylaws comes because when I was first appointed to the HR committee, I had asked about the HR committee's charge. And so I went to the bylaws 155 and found that quite a few things that the HR committee was charged with doing, they were not doing, other committees were doing. So I inquired about that. And I think this is the result. But to be clear, I was not asking for a change to the 155 bylaw. I was asking for the HR committee to follow its charge as listed in the policy. And I'm really quite concerned about what I see as an overarching, shift of responsibility to the governance committee. If we look at page 3 on the policy 155, it says that the primary function of the governance committee is to provide guidance and direction in accordance with Board of Education bylaws and policies to the board and to the superintendent of schools on issues related to board governance, district and board bylaws and policy, district strategic plan, and communications with the public. And it does not, it does not state that the governance committee should be assisting in the hiring, evaluation, retention, and compensation of the superintendent of schools. That was a responsibility given specifically to the HR committee that the HR committee did not, take on in the anyway. So that was number one. Number two, in the governance committee, I had objected to this at a previous meeting, which I believe was when the committees were selected, that the governance committee membership should be one member from education, HR, and operations, and it's preferably the chairperson. I really object to the way this current governance committee has been selected, that the chairperson of operations is not represented. That was number two. Number three, all right. So then number three is that the HR committees, all of the responsibilities for the HR committee in terms of, what was it? Let me see. I guess it was non-educational professional services, including the board attorney, auditor, treasurer, school physician, et cetera, are all now in the operations, which is actually what the, current practice is. But my point is that HR should, actually these responsibilities should go back to HR, and that the committee should follow bylaws 155 as it was written. I think that was all I wanted to say for now.
Thank you, Mr. Trujillo. Mrs. Sachs?
Regarding some points that Mr. Trujillo just said, I was on HR last year and I'm on operations this year. My experiences on HR last year, it seemed like our meeting times were relatively short compared to operations last year and this year. So I think there is room for, I can understand if they had to shift responsibilities because of, they had too many responsibilities, but I do think there is room, and especially shifting things that are definitely HR related items, such as, oversight with respect to, attorneys, et cetera. That should stay in HR. I also think we should change the wording about, and I think Ms. Rio alluded to this, about that preferably the governance should consist of chairpersons. I think we should remove preferably, and that the members on governance should be, will be chairs from the other committees. Unless, of course, any chair refuses it, then another member from that committee would be appointed. And I'd also like to suggest, and this is coming from, I participated in the Labor Management Collaborative over the weekend, or whenever it was. I'm getting all my meetings mixed up. And several other virtual meetings that were New Jersey school boards related, about having a community member on some of the board committees. Certainly not HR, but at the very least, communications, that would be ideal, I think, and arguably some of the other ones. I've had discussions with people on other boards where that has been a practice for several years, and there are a lot of positives to that.
Okay, thank you, Mrs. Stats. Mr. Gillette, and then I think I saw Mr. Pulsifer.
All right, thank you. So I have a few things to say on this also. as far as the professional services, like the architect and the other associated things, those are not employees. Mr. Callahan it can offer. I mean, I don't. It's gonna sound bad, but he can offer no valuable input into that. I don't think. Because they're not in place. Those things should officially go to operations. Operations committee has been handling the appointment of those services and should remain. HR committee should deal with employees and things that Mr. Callahan and his department and people can advise on. That's the way that committee should work. So I'm okay with that. As far as Mrs. Stott's recommendation, I appreciate the recommendation about the chairs, but it's being on governance committee. But once you've done that, or once you've stated that, then you've bought in to an idea of governance committee, that a premise about what governance committee should be that I don't agree with at all. I think that the danger now is that governance committee has been moving towards becoming an executive committee of the board, where things pass through governance committee acting on behalf of the board almost. And so a little bit of what Ms. Trio said, maybe aggregating some other power and responsibility towards governance committee. The governance committee to me was a committee that should be looking at the way the board operates, bylaws of the board, board self-evaluation, and the other things that had to do with the impetus for the governance committee being created, which was the NJQSAC, which had 4 areas: operations, HR, education, and governance. And those governance areas were about compliance with state accountability requirements, things like that. That was supposed to be handled by governance. Once you've said now, I don't even think you need to have one board member from each different other committee on governance, because I don't think governance should be doing those type of things in the first place. I know we've already have the bylaw written, and the responsibilities for things like the budget are already in there, so it has to work this way, I guess. But I don't like the way that the governance committee has been moving towards the last few years towards becoming an executive committee of the board. So I agree with some of the things that Jean and Jane said, and I disagree with some others. That's all. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Gillette. Mr. Pulsifer?
Well, thank you, Mr. Gillette, for making my first point for me. Yes, the professional contracted services, I believe strongly should not be part of HR. HR is about employees and staff of the district. These professional contracted services do not have to follow any of our rules about how they work their workday, their calendar, anything like that. We have no control over those people. And HR is about managing the staff that we have. And we don't have management rights and management prerogatives when it comes to contracted services. So I don't believe they belong in HR, because that's not the area that we cover. Professional services is what operations does already. The other thing I want to talk about is the section about superintendent within the HR committee. I believe that the search for a new superintendent is well above any one of our standing committees, and should not put the focus on any one committee, because the operation of the district and the educational programs of this district are equally as important as the staff of this district when it comes time to evaluating and searching for a superintendent. So I do believe it belongs somewhere outside of HR. Whether governance is the right place, I understand your perspective, Greg, on what should the governance committee be, but I certainly think from focusing on one of our standing committees excludes the other 2 committees from having input into the process on selecting a new superintendent. And given that the purview of the superintendent is across all 3 standing committees, it should not be any one single committee of that is responsible.
Thank you, Mr. Pulsifer. Mr. Sachs?
But, and to your point, Mr. Pulsifer, I believe the bylaw currently says that, I guess, unless there's an ad hoc committee for a search. So that I would prefer, to be honest with you, if there were an ad hoc committee for a superintendent search, and that is already contained in the bylaw.
That was actually something that was added during this process. It was not previously in the bylaw, but in switching it to governance, we added that. Governance recommended that we add that for very much that reason, for what Mr. Pulsifer said and Ms. Stats. I wouldn't anticipate that if we went out for a full superintendent search that we wouldn't have an ad hoc committee. You know, and that might be an executive committee, you know, that of the chairs, or, you know, or those people who have a background in HR or in hiring executives, or the most seniority on the board. You know, and so it could be a totally different selection process than what would be. I actually think seniority would play a huge role there, not in terms of current seniority, but maybe if you did what Mrs. Haas, Mrs. Pulsifer, Mr. Pulsifer, and I did, which was be on the board, go off the board, come back on the board, you know, cumulative over time. But yeah, I mean, I take everybody's points. I mean, I think, you know, this policy has, the governance committee came into being, you know, only a few years ago. And I think originally was just really a sort of an extension of a policy committee, and has been, you know, sort of adjusted over time. With regard to selection of this year's committee, I mean, you know, the board president selects the chairs of all of the committees. So in fact, removing that piece that you had suggested, Mrs. Stats, doesn't play a huge role, because I could have made a different selection on operations, you know, and made that adjustment. That wasn't my intent, was to form an executive committee. My intent was to make sure communications, of which we all agreed was incredibly important during these times, was represented on governance. And it just so happened that Dr. Harris was also on operations, so it made it possible. I think I've heard that Mr. Oliver, would you like to speak? I missed you. Sorry, you weren't on my screen for a bit.
That's okay. I was waving. I think Mr. Gillette said it the best, that, you know, the governance committee is kind of morphed into something a little bit different than what its intended purpose was. You know, when I first read this, and I read it a couple of times, it just seemed like the governance committee was starting to fish in other committees' ponds, and I had some concerns and reservations about it. I don't necessarily have any concerns or reservations about the appointments of individuals to different committees. That's at the discretion of the president, and again, whoever serves on those committees is fine. To the point of a superintendent search, and I think, you know, you hit it right on the head, is you would form an ad hoc committee. You wouldn't have an HR committee or a governance committee do a superintendent search. So, you know, everybody brings up some very valid points, but I just thought that the reach and what the governance committee was trying to do with this bylaws change was a little bit kind of out of the norm.
I think Mrs. Trujillo raised her hand first, and then Mr. Gillette.
Actually, can Greg go? I'm just looking for something right now.
Mine is quick. I forgot a point the first time around. And it's a small point, and you know, we don't have to do anything about it. But in the traditional New Jersey school boards format, a board president doesn't chair any of the committees. It can attend all the committees. That's their, like, the trade-off, but they don't chair any. When I hate to go back and say, but when I was board president, I didn't chair the governance committee. I appointed the vice president to chair the governance committee. I don't know if do others, and I'd like to know, do other school boards have their board presidents in this format attend all the committee meetings plus chair a committee? Not an ad hoc committee, but an actual ongoing committee. I don't know that, you know, that I think might be irregular, but it might be normal. I don't know, but just something unusual.
Yeah, I'm not sure, Greg. Interesting point. Mrs. Trujillo.
Okay, so I thought about Greg brought up some interesting points about professional services. I have to think about that, but it sounds good just kind of on the fly. But his points about the executive committee, I really hadn't thought about that very much. And I think that's kind of a very nice way of saying, kind of like the underlying feeling that I had when I read the revisions to the bylaw, which is that it seems like a lot of responsibility has been collected by the governance committee, and I object to that. So the other thing with respect to the superintendent search, what I wanted to point out is that that's what I was looking for, is I was looking at the original board, the 155, and there's specific hiring, there's some specific responsibilities. Only the first one is regarding the hiring of the superintendent. The other ones are all related to HR, which is review evaluation criteria and procedures for the annual evaluation of the superintendent and recommend changes, coordinate the annual evaluation, conduct at least one interim, recommend compensation levels, and review job descriptions annually. So, I mean, I forget where I read it, but they was talking about, I think, okay, HR, when I read earlier, is that recommends retention of highly qualified professionals, like that was like kind of the original of the HR committee, like at the very beginning in description. But the only employee that the board actually has any responsibility over, like directly, is the superintendent. So that's why I'm confused when that responsibility of evaluating the beginning the process, I think that's what it's called, is coordinate the annual evaluation, why that piece has been moved away from the HR committee. So those are my 2 points. Thank you. And actually, I was kind of thinking that maybe this bylaw is not ready for voting tonight, that we might want to rethink it, because otherwise I'm going to vote no on this tonight, on the first reading.
So, are there any other board comments? Hold on, I feel everybody. Mrs. Stats.
This is, I guess, out of my own ignorance. So when we're talking about first reading versus second reading. So in voting yes with the first reading, are you saying you're okay with it as it is, or are you just okay with moving the process forward? I guess I just want to know what that would indicate.
Yeah, it's just that you're okay moving the process forward and that further discussion can happen. It doesn't mean that you are okay with every single thing that's written down here. That would be after second reading. If you vote on second reading, that would assume that you're okay with everything.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Mr. Pulsifer.
Just to add to Jane's question, there's certainly been times where we have voted yes on a policy or bylaw for first reading with explicit instruction to the administration or a committee to actually revisit a specific section before we had the second vote, the second reading.
Yeah, that's absolutely possible. Yeah.
I would object to that for this particular case, since there are so many points that I think that there is disagreement on, and I would not feel comfortable voting yes on something when we haven't really even discussed what we might possibly change. I would actually like to refer it back to committee, and so that the governance committee could take a look at the points that were brought up tonight.
Well, at the end of discussion, you can make a motion to send it back to committee. That would be appropriate. But
Okay.
let me just make a couple of comments regarding. So the only thing that's being added to governance tonight, or that was recommended added to governance, was the actual hiring, evaluation, and retention of the superintendent. So I just want to be clear on that. It's not, and that's the only change that has happened in the last couple of years, besides developing the tentative budget, which was actually referred from the operations committee up to governance. The other thing is, with respect to moving the selection process for the attorney and other subcontracted people, that's going to operations, which has been the practice of the board for many years. As long as I've been on, I'm sure Mr. Gillette might have a longer history, since he's been on operations, I think, since he started on the board. So I think it's been there forever, Greg. Yes, I'm getting thumbs up. So with respect to the many thumbs up, with respect to the to the piece on the superintendent, the hiring of the superintendent, I agree with Mr. Pulsifer, and obviously he's on governance, so we discussed this, that it is cross-cutting across all the board committees. I also think that if we wanted to codify that there would be a committee named by the president at that point, whenever we were looking for the next superintendent, an ad hoc committee specific to that action, I think that's fine. The one thing that I did want to talk about was with respect to all of those sub-bullets under that. So developing selection criteria and procedure for hiring, that when no ad hoc committee was created, it's fine, but we could create an ad hoc committee. With regard to the evaluation, this is my first year as president, and we have, by my count, 3 former presidents. The evaluation criteria is the board goals, right? The superintendent goals as set by the full board the year before, and then the NJSBA process, which is something that the president just has to go in after the superintendent fills in their goals and say, yes, this is ready for the rest of the board. Is that correct, my 3 former presidents?
Yes.
That's correct.
That's not really a committee thing at all. That is the president's responsibility. So that's one thing. Coordinating, and that goes with coordinating the annual evaluation. If that doesn't happen, that falls on me. The buck stops here. That's the president's problem. Conduct at least one interim evaluation. I don't know that that's ever been done. I don't believe it was done when I was vice president. I can't speak to whether or not it was done in previous years, but that is uncommon for there to be a formal one. I mean, that is usually done through the president just conversing with the superintendent regularly and saying, I think you're making a mistake here, or, is that informal? I'm asking Judy, Chris, and Greg, the former presidents of the board.
I was on the phone with Jordan every single day.
Right.
Oh boy.
I was on several times a day.
Judy, you got me beat then. I had that 502 phone call every day, 502.
Yep, 502.
I spoke with Dr. Gulick on a regular basis, but there was no formal interim evaluation. I give him plenty of feedback every day or every other day, so there wasn't much need for an interim eval.
Okay, so there you have it. With regard to recommending compensation levels to the board, I mean, we do that on a 3-year contract basis, and that really was something that we did in executive session. I gave comps, and people really responded. So, again, that's not really a committee as much as it is the president's responsibility. Review job descriptions annually and update when appropriate. We do that basically when we hire the superintendent, not annually. I don't think it changes that quickly. But so maybe the whole purpose of this was right sizing in terms of codifying what has been our practice. So with that respect, I mean, I do think there are some things here that it seems like we tried to add a lot of words. I mean, I didn't write this. This was all moved from HR, except it's the only thing that was added was when an ad hoc committee is not created. So perhaps there is more that the committee can do to make this correct to the actual responsibilities of committee versus president. Yes, Mrs. Trujillo.
So I hear everything you're saying. It sounds like good, but I think to Greg's point about the executive nature of the governance committee, I think that actually is probably the most important thing that came out of this discussion tonight is that, and that's why I don't think this policy is ready for first reading tonight, is that I think we need to revisit the purpose of the governance committee. I mean, from the things that I heard Greg say about the reason it came to be was CUSAC, and there is not supposed to be an executive committee of the board, like at all, right? The 9 of us, although some of us chair, we each get 1 vote on this dais, and we only get the vote when we come together. It shouldn't be like 4 people in a committee that kind of have already made the decision for the rest of us. That was number 1. And that's why I will, I guess, make a motion to refer back to committee. Number two is speaking about the superintendent's the superintendent selection. I think maybe not in this particular policy, but I think it should be codified in writing in policy that all board members who would like to participate in the superintendent selection should be allowed to. I don't think there should, as school boards have said to us over and over again, selecting the superintendent is the number one most important job of the board. And so I understand that the 9 of us, not all of us have the same level of time, like available time, right? But that shouldn't preclude those who would like to be participating in the selection process to not be selected by the board president. So I feel like that's number 2. Oh, number 3 is the good points about the superintendent's evaluation that starts with the board president. I think that could probably be added to that board bylaw number, whatever that is, where it talks about the president's role.
Yeah, I do think that there are some things here that can be pulled and moved to the president. I don't see where what's in the governance committee currently making it an executive committee. Except for, if it would be a committee of chairs. And certainly we have no additional votes than any board member has. Everything that any recommendation we make has to come back to the full board, and that's just like this bylaw is. So I'm a little confused by why people are feeling this is an executive, turning into an executive committee. But that being said, I have no, I don't have a problem with not moving this forward tonight. There is nothing pressing here. So, we have our superintendent locked in for, it's remaining of a 4-year contract, or actually it starts tomorrow for 4-year contract. So the rest of for 4 years or the first. So that's her, for another 4 years. So we can look at this and parse this out into the president's responsibilities and things like that, and come back at another time. I think this has been a good discussion. And I look forward to hearing people's thoughts on it now that we've discussed whether or not, what they think is appropriate and not appropriate as we move forward. Does anybody have any other comments? We need a motion to table if that is in fact going to be the case. But I do want to make it clear that only 5 people need to actually be in favor of the bylaw for it to actually be formalized. But I don't feel comfortable myself in moving it forward without some additional discussion and perhaps right sizing again, since that was the full intent of this. So
would it be preferable to refer to committee or to table? Because I would like to review it.
Refer to committee.
Okay. So I make a motion to refer bylaw 155 to governance committee?
Yes.
Okay. That's the motion.
I'll second.
Thank you, Mr. Gillette. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Anybody abstaining or opposed? Okay, then motion passes, right, Mr. Mahmood?
Yes.
Thank you. Okay. With that, I think we are done with our action agenda. Does anybody have any board comments before we adjourn?
We have to go back into closed session.
We do, yes.
And also, did we have a roll call on the agenda?
Yes.
Yeah, we did.
Yeah. Oh, we did.
Okay.
Okay, so we are moving back into closed session, so, and no action will be taken. But I will reread that closed session verbiage, because I think that's what I need to do. Yes?
Yes. Yes, please.
Let me go back to that. Okay. Whereas the Open Public Meetings Act, Chapter 231 of the laws of 1975 provides that a public body may exclude the public from that portion of a meeting of which the public body discusses certain matters for which confidentiality is required as permitted in Section 7B of the Act. Resolved by the Board of Education of the Township of Hillsborough and the County of Somerset and State of New Jersey as follows. The matter we discussed are negotiations with the Hillsborough Public Principals and Supervisors Association, and the matters to be discussed in executive session shall be disclosed to the public when the need for confidentiality no longer exists, and no action will be taken. So we will adjourn from our closed session.
We just need a motion and a second, Dr. Swasan.
Yep. Can I have a motion here on the executive? Sorry, I missed that.
John Oliver moved it, and Lisa Maroon second.
Great. All in favor?
Aye.
Anybody opposed or abstaining? No? Okay, so we will close this session, this Google Meet, and we will go into the other executive session Google Meet now. Good evening, everybody. And our next meeting is the third. Sorry, Mrs. Trujillo?
What's the address for the other Google Meet? Is it the same one as before?
It is.
Got it. Thank you.
And our next board meeting is not in 2 weeks, but in 4 weeks, correct? Or is it the 20? Let me look at that.
July 20th.
July 20th.
Yes.
Thank you.
Yep, that's it.
I knew it was the week of the 20th, so it's in 3 weeks. So we'll have some movement on maybe getting in person with some phone calls or something before then. But okay, thanks everyone. Have a good July. See you guys in the other Google Meet.
Thank you.
Bye.